Hello everybody, it's Todd Gilchrist, IGN Movie Senior Editor.
This is Rich with IGN Comics.
And this is IGN's video review for The Dark Knight.
I've seen now what it would have to become to stop men like him.
The night is darkest just before the dawn. And I promise you, the dawn is coming.
And here we go.
One of the biggest things people are curious about in terms of The Dark Knight is how it continues and maybe develops some of the ideas that were created in Batman Begins. And Christopher Nolan really does an amazing job taking the universe that he created in the first film, which is a very realistic one, and expanding that by really introducing some new characters and creating a real dynamic that I think really strengthens the combination of comic book mythology and the realism of the first film.
Picking up on the idea of escalation from the first film, characters are manifested in two principal ways in The Dark Knight. The first would be the Joker on the side of evil, and he basically represents anarchy and crushing the societal order that is in Gotham. And on the other side of that would be Harvey Dent, the side of good, trying to restore order from the chaos that had been caused in Batman Begins. And basically in the middle of the two of them is Batman himself, who, while working outside of the law, so in a sense on Joker's side, he's still trying to achieve Harvey Dent's ideals and goals for the city. The Joker, a lot has been said about Heath Ledger's performance, and he is of course incredible in the film. The Joker himself, though, is kind of a mix of everything that has come before, both from comics and films, no matter where you've seen him, and mixes them all together into something that is familiar to fans, yet entirely unique. Harvey Dent, on the other hand, plays out a little bit how you'd expect, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. The entire movie becomes about Dent's journey from stepping in as a fresh DA to what some might see as a tragic downfall as he clashes with the Joker for control of Gotham. In an interesting way, even though Batman isn't entirely the soul of the movie, everything that you see in this film stems from what he did in the first film and his actions throughout this.
Rich brings up a couple of really important points in terms of the success of this film, not only in terms of its idea of escalation, but in terms of the way in which the characters interact with one another and sort of conflict, which really transposes sort of the comic book mythology onto a real world context. I mean, in particular, that was what I thought was maybe the greatest strength of the movie, is that you don't feel like you're sort of functioning within the rules of like what can happen in a comic book, but you really do feel like any and all of this could have happened in real life in any real normal city.
Yeah, it's really interesting because while I was watching the film, I mean, through the opening acts, I was like, okay, good, this is great, but moving along. But about, I guess, halfway through, it suddenly dawned on me how much of this can apply to our world, and also just how much the characters speak to real world situations, and specific ones can be directly applied to terrorists and the United States and its war on terror, and there's just a lot of layers to this film, and you can watch it from the simple comic book standpoint to a great crime drama to something that speaks to much more. So it was really fantastic in that regard.
Yeah, and moreover, the fact that it does have a real philosophy. I mean, that you create this dynamic that exists between Batman, the Joker, Harvey Dent, and even Lieutenant/Commissioner Gordon. You do really feel like there's a sense that these characters are not purely even just characters. I mean, they are representative of ideas that are far more sophisticated and complicated than anything I feel like we've seen in any comic book movie thus far.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, really, the only two that even come close, and I don't feel they even reach what Dark Knight accomplishes, are Batman Begins and Spider-Man 2. And Batman Begins feels like a warm-up to this, and then Spider-Man 2 is a much more personal journey, so it feels much smaller. Still a great film, but not as ambitious as what this does.
And this film is also extremely dark and intense. As a matter of fact, quite frankly, I was a little bit surprised that it managed to get a PG-13 because not so much because there was graphic violence as just sort of the general level of menace and intensity. I mean, that said, it still has this real level of excitement to it. I mean, and sort of just the interplay of all these different elements is obviously why I gave it 5 stars when I read through it here. I mean, it's a really amazing artistic achievement and a great summer movie at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely agree with the 5 out of 5, and I mean, I would also just recommend to anybody who's going to see this film that they do whatever they can to see this in IMAX, because it's just intense, and you have to experience it in that regard. And I mean, to be honest, I kind of hate IMAX, but this makes it worthwhile. This is the way to see it, is in IMAX.
Absolutely.